Hey everybody, it's Lynn Hayes here. Thanks for coming back to my channel. In today's video, we'll be talking about the astrology for the week from March 1st to March 8th, 2021. There's not very much going on in the skies all through the month of March, which is kind of a relief. When there's a lot of major planetary alignments, there's a lot of energy in the sky, there's a lot of pressure for change. That can be really exciting, it can be exhilarating, but it can sometimes be exhausting, and we've had so much going on over the last 12 months. You know, it's been almost a year since the pandemic started. So in March, there's no outer planet alignments, really. There's no planets retrograde. All of the planets are traveling in direct motion. So it's a little bit of a breather, I think. It's an opportunity for us to step back a little bit, kind of regroup, and see where we want to go from here. We do have one planet changing direction this week, and that's Mars, which is moving from Taurus into Gemini. Last year, for over 6 months, Mars was in its own sign of Aries. It didn't leave Aries until January, and then it moved into Taurus. While Mars was in Aries, there was a lot of conflict. Mars is very fiery, it's aggressive, and it brings out our own fire and our own aggression. Then Mars moved into Taurus, and all of a sudden we needed more stillness. This week, on March 3rd, Mars will be moving into the sign of Gemini, and it will stay there until April 23rd. Mars is the planet of war and aggression and assertiveness, but it also represents our physical drive, our physical desires, our emotional desires, our motivations. It gives us courage and a sense of needing to defend ourselves and others as well. It also represents our passions and our aspirations. Where Saturn is the planet that defines our goals, Saturn's very achievement-oriented. It motivates us to set goals for things that we want to achieve and accomplish. Those are very Saturn things. But without the energy of Mars and the enthusiasm to drive that, we really wouldn't have these goals or these aspirations. So Mars is very important in all of the areas of life satisfaction, really. In traditional astrology, Mars is considered an evildoer. I've always loved that term, evildoer. But Mars is associated with unpleasant things like war and blood and knives and cutting things. You know, it has a tendency to cut things out of our life. It's often called the lesser malefic for that reason. But in the modern world and in modern astrology, we don't put that kind of judgments typically on planets or on signs. Things aren't bad or good. In fact, in my view, a lot of the things that are considered good, grand trines, Jupiter, you know, those are things that bring ease and comfort into our lives, but they don't necessarily create change, and they don't necessarily help us to grow and to evolve. If the overarching motivation is towards comfort and stability and complacency, then those things are very helpful. But if we are on a path of growth, of personal growth, of transformation, then it's really the challenging things, the hard planets, Mars and Saturn and Pluto. They're the guys that really help to get the work done. Mars is also very important in the area of physical health. When we have a Mars that is not expressed easily, where we tend not to speak up for ourselves, where we tend not to defend ourselves, we can often have some health problems as a result of that. The energy of Mars seems to somehow back up in the psycho-emotional system. Often in those situations, I see a wide variety of health problems, generally tied to the immune system. Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, even multiple sclerosis has a Mars component. And if you're interested in that, I could do a whole video about Mars and health. So just let me know in the comments if that's something that interests you. Mars is moving into the sign of Gemini, as I said, and Gemini is a sign of curiosity and the intellect. There's a hunger for new experiences and a strong desire to learn more about a wide variety of topics. Gemini is the jack of all trades and the master of none. Under the influence of Gemini, we tend not to have the kind of focus that's required in order to really dive deep into a subject. Under the influence of Gemini, there's more of a desire for a broad range of experience rather than just something that's very focused. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which was called Hermes in Greece. He was known for his quick mind, and he was known to be a bit of a trickster. He very easily talked himself out of difficult situations. And he's also known to be a giver of charm, which I think is very interesting. And under the influence of Mercury, and in this case Gemini, we do learn how to operate in a wide variety of situations. So with Mars, the planet of action, in Gemini, the sign that looks for all of these different experiences, there's a sense of pursuing experiences that will teach us more about ourselves. And in doing so, there's this idea that we can learn how to perform or how to manage in a wide variety of situations. This will be a big difference from Mars, which has been in Taurus, which is very slow to act. You know, Mars is the planet of action. And in Taurus, the sign of the bull, the sign of comfort, stability, Mars can be slow to act. Under that Mars and Taurus influence, which is shining on all of us, no matter what our chart is like, there's a sense of just being slower. Everything is slower to unfold. There's not a big hurry to do anything. Then Mars moves into the sign of Gemini, which is much more active, curious. There's no time to waste. There's so many things to do, so many things to be involved in. So that's definitely a shift, and you'll definitely likely see a change here. This shift from Mars, from Taurus into Gemini, helps to activate the intellect. We're moving from Earth, which is very stable and grounded, to air, which has much more to do with communication, with learning, with information. So with Mars and Gemini, we have the force of Mars, which is dispersed. So it's diluted through all of these different experiences. This is not really going to help us to be very focused. If you have a big project that requires a lot of mental focus, you may want to use some of your other planetary gifts to make that happen. This is a time when we're going to require more organizational tools because everything is so interesting. It may be more difficult to settle down to one project and make sure that that's completed, if that's a concern to you. On the positive side, with Mars and Gemini, there's a strong desire to communicate, to collaborate, to interact with others. Gemini is sort of known to be chatty, conversational. You know, under the influence of Gemini, there's a tendency for more discussion. It's also a good time for writers because Gemini does have a lot to do with communication. It's ruled by Mercury, and here is Mars with the drive being to communicate and to express our views and to share information. Mars enters Gemini on March 3rd. That's really the only major thing to talk about this week, so let's get right to the week ahead. On Monday, March 1st, we begin with the moon in Libra all day that day. And over the course of the day on Monday, the Libra moon will interact harmoniously in trines to the Aquarius planets. So that's Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury. This is a very harmonious day where people are getting along, where we're not really blocked from doing anything that we want to do, but things come very easily when we're dealing with a trine. It's not a time, as I said before, where there's going to be a crisis that's going to result in some sort of great awakening, but it's going to be very comfortable. The moon in Libra really craves that comfort, craves that sense of harmony, and we'll definitely get it on Monday, March 1st. On Tuesday, March 2nd, we have a harmonious trine from Mercury, which is in Aquarius, to the North Node, which is in Gemini. Aspects and transits to the North Node aren't really powerful experiences. I believe that it's very unusual that anybody really wakes up that day and says, oh my gosh, my destiny was just changed. The North Node is involved in the path to the future. It is a point of fate and destiny. And when there is a planetary alignment affecting the North Node, of course, it also affects the South Node. So there's a release at the South Node that helps to prepare us to move more fully into the future, as suggested by the North Node. But these are more subtle influences, I feel. So here we have Mercury in the sign of Aquarius, the planet of the mind, in the sign of reason and logic, harmonizing with the point of the future. It's possible that on Tuesday, March 2nd, under this influence, that there may be some sort of message that you receive, either from inside your own thoughts, from the inner voice, or perhaps from a voice that comes to you from outside. And you may not even notice it, but you may look back and say, oh, that phone call really changed my life. Or it may be that you have a thought or an idea to change something about your life, and it has a lasting effect. So just watch for any messages that you might experience on this day. Tuesday is not going to be quite as mellow and harmonious as Monday because the Libra moon will form a square to Capricorn at 9:09 a.m. Eastern Time. And then later in the afternoon Eastern Time, after about 3 p.m., the moon will be moving into Scorpio, which is more intense, which is more passionate. But that morning square from the moon to Pluto can cause a deepening of the intensity of our feelings and emotions. And we have the Libra moon seeking that harmony. And then here comes Pluto saying, not so fast. How about these other things that you've been ignoring? These things that might create some conflict, but that need resolution. Ultimately, Pluto's role, I feel, is to create the kind of transformation that will help us to connect more deeply at a soul level, which will in turn help us to move more smoothly and easily in the direction of our destiny. So it's a very important planet and personal transformation. It's easy to be afraid of it. It does relate to death and destruction and rebirth and all those heavy things. But Pluto is also a wise guide. And I think if we look at Pluto that way, it makes our whole astrological journey much more rewarding, really. So we have the moon going into Scorpio at 3:38 p.m. on Tuesday, March 2nd. And after that time, the depth of our emotion really takes precedence. There's going to be no hiding from our feelings, so we might as well just dive on in, express them. Scorpio is a water sign, so it is about emotion, but it's also ruled by Mars. It's very passionate. Now, Mars is the traditional ruler. Pluto is the modern ruler. Before Pluto was discovered, of course, Mars was the ruler of Scorpio. And Mars describes the passionate nature of Scorpio, but Pluto describes the intensity and the depth of the experience that we have under a Scorpio influence. So the moon in Scorpio helps us to go very deeply into the realm of feelings, without judgment, without fear, just the experience. Also on Tuesday, we have an aspect that's beginning to build, which won't culminate until the following day on Wednesday, but we'll definitely be starting to feel it on Tuesday. That's a harmonious sextile from Venus, which is in Pisces, to Uranus, which is in Taurus. Venus in Pisces is very compassionate. The emotion of Pisces is very open. There's no self in the emotion of Pisces. So it's not about, this is how I feel. The emotion of Pisces is more of the sort of universal consciousness, universal compassion. When Venus is in Pisces, it's said to be exalted because that's the highest expression of human love. So there's this beautiful, magical Venus in Pisces influence harmonizing with Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of new paradigms. This aspect will only last for a day or so. It culminates Wednesday at around noon, and I usually give about 36 hours for Venus aspects, so we'll definitely start feeling it, sometime on Tuesday. And sometimes these very harmonious aspects, we don't even really notice them. It's like when the temperature of a room is comfortable, nobody says, the temperature is so comfortable right now. We only notice when we're cold or when we're hot. It's kind of the same thing with harmonious planetary aspects, especially when they're very soft like this one with Venus. But it is a wonderful time that day for any kind of interaction with other humans. It would be a wonderful time to see a friend. It would be a beautiful time to spend time with your partner if you have one. If you're single and if you're alone, it still is a beautiful time to just be with yourself. This Venus aspect can work to forge more enlightened relationships or more enlightened interactions with other people. So if we're alone and we're spending time by ourselves, we can still have this awakening of a new way to interact with the other people that are in your life. On Wednesday, that lovely Venus-Uranus aspect culminates at around noon Eastern Time. And then between 7 and about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, please always adjust for your own locality. The Scorpio moon conflicts with Mercury and with Jupiter. When the moon conflicts in a square with Jupiter, there can be some arguments, especially Scorpio. Scorpio, with its modern ruler being Pluto, the planet of power, is very sensitive to who has power, and Scorpio really wants to hold on to power and doesn't really like to give it away. And when we have a square from the Scorpio moon to Mercury, any kind of argument, even though it may seem superficial and relatively meaningless, could have more meaning and more depth than we might expect. It could reveal other power issues that kind of lie beneath the surface. And when the Scorpio moon squares Mercury, that can just kind of expand the situation. When there's a challenging aspect to Jupiter, it's not as challenging as with some other planets because Jupiter is generally beneficent, but there can still be some frustration if we're not able to really achieve the kind of experience that we're looking for in that moment. So this is between 7 and 8:30 p.m. is when those aspects are exact. Eastern Time, I would expect them to start building maybe in the afternoon, and then by the later evening they will have moved on. And then Mars enters Gemini around 10:30 that night. On Thursday, March 4th, we have a conjunction from Mercury to Jupiter in Aquarius. This aspect doesn't culminate until late in the evening, around 10:30 Eastern Time, but it will be building all through the day. Mercury and Jupiter are both in the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is really the sign of the higher mind. This idea of the higher mind has a lot of different avenues in astrology. The higher mind, in terms of knowledge, is associated with the sign of Sagittarius. But the higher mind, in terms of the intuition that just descends on us, just an inner knowing, we don't know where it came from, but all of a sudden we have an intuitive flash that is kind of brilliant, and we have no idea what it means, but it takes us in a direction that's completely new. That's a very Aquarian type of experience. And we have Mercury, the planet of the mind, and Jupiter, the planet of philosophy and the planet that shows where we find meaning in life, both in the sign of Aquarius. This idea of change and of really needing to experience a life that has real meaning for us, that feels authentic. This is a theme, actually, now that I think of it, in many of the readings that I've done since the beginning of the year, especially in the last couple of months. We've had all these planets in Aquarius. Aquarius does ask whether we are leading a life that's authentic to us. And if we're not, we generally are made very aware of that. And when you come to one of these Aquarian times, or if you're having a transit of Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius, often we look at our life and we go, what am I doing? I've had this job for 20 years. I thought I loved it, but now I can't stand it. You know, it doesn't fit me anymore. And this is the thing. Right now, we're in this time of major change. Anything that doesn't fit has got to go. This transit, this conjunction from Mercury to Jupiter, only lasts for about a day or so. It's a time when these themes may be in the forefront of our mind. So watch for that. On Thursday, March 4th, the moon is still in Scorpio, and at 11:09 a.m. that day, the Scorpio moon forms a harmonious sextile to Pluto. Because Pluto, as we've talked about, is the modern ruler of Scorpio, this has some extra kind of punch. The Scorpio moon is already powerful and intense, harmonizing with Pluto now. This aspect only lasts for a few hours. By early afternoon Eastern Time, it will have already gone. And then the moon will enter Sagittarius around 5:42 p.m. Eastern Time. When the moon moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius, you know, every time there's this shift between the signs, each sign is so different than the one before it. There's a definite change of mood. So here we're moving from Scorpio, which is so passionate, so intense, and we're moving into Sagittarius, which really has a drive to be happy and optimistic, which has a much longer range view. Scorpio can kind of get bogged down in some of these emotional details, especially if there's a sticking point with a power dynamic. But then the moon moves into Sagittarius on Thursday afternoon, and there's immediately sort of a lift. Right after the moon moves into Sagittarius, it's going to oppose Mars, which is now in Gemini. This kind of stressful opposition between the Sagittarius moon and Mars in Gemini is not going to be as extreme as some other oppositions could be. Sagittarius is generally pretty positive and optimistic, and Mars in Gemini is just kind of open-minded, having lots of different experiences. Sagittarius and Gemini are the two polarities that probably have the most in common and have the least amount of stress. But this is definitely a time of curiosity, of learning. You know, the mind is open and stuff can just fall in it. And that takes us to Friday, March 5th. The moon is in Sagittarius, conjunct the south node. The sun is in Pisces, squaring the nodal axis. The nodes of the moon representing the direction from past to future. The Sagittarius moon conjunct the south node, perhaps calling to us from the past, bringing up something that might be unresolved, something that we need to let go of in order to move forward. And then the sun, the solar conscious mind, in a challenging square aspect to both ends of the nodal axis. There could be a choice, there could be a change of course, there could be an awareness that perhaps we're going down a path that doesn't really take us to our destination. We may need to make a slight course adjustment on that day. So just watch for that. I'd be very interested if any of you have this sort of experience. Meanwhile, the Sagittarius moon is quite busy that day. In the morning Eastern time, it harmonizes with Chiron and then with Saturn. Those two aspects are very stabilizing. You won't even notice them. They'll just help you to feel more integrated. And a little later that morning, around 11 a.m. Eastern time, the Sagittarius moon will square Venus in Pisces. These lunar aspects are so mild and so fleeting, you won't really notice them. So the biggest thing on Friday is just the potential for this course correction with the sun and the moon both interacting with the nodal axis. And that takes us to Saturday, March 6th. There are some lunar aspects that occur very early in the morning Eastern time. The moon is just in Sagittarius all day on Saturday, inspiring us to expand, to be confident, to be optimistic. That's a really good day to look into the future. Sagittarius has that long-range view. And it's also a really good time to set some goals that are kind of based on this long-range thinking about where you're going in your life. And then when the moon enters Capricorn that evening, Eastern time, you'll be prepared. The moon in Capricorn really likes to create a structure. So you've already had this vision, this long-range vision, exploring different possibilities. Then here's the moon in Capricorn, which helps you to organize your thoughts. While the moon is in Capricorn, we may not be joyful. We may not experience a lot of happiness or sadness because Capricorn is more about the work. When the moon is in Capricorn, we tend to be much more pragmatic, much more realistic. Then on Sunday morning, March 7th, the Capricorn moon squares Ceres and Chiron. And this is all through the morning from like 7 a.m. to noon Eastern time. This is a very important time for self-care. When the moon is in Capricorn and it's in a challenging aspect to Ceres, the planet / asteroid, that teaches us how to take care of ourselves, that help us to nourish and nurture our body and our sense of being in a body. That means loving the body that we have and not being critical of it. We're also dealing with Chiron that morning, and Chiron has to do with the soul wounds, the emotional wounds that create blocks in our body's energy system. On Sunday morning with the Capricorn moon in challenging aspects to both Ceres and Chiron, there could very well be a tendency to not take care of ourselves, to not pay attention to the need for healing, because Capricorn isn't really oriented in that way. Capricorn is about getting things done. And this only lasts for a few hours. It's a lunar aspect, but I'm going to recommend that Sunday morning you spend some time focusing on consciously taking care of yourself, taking care of your body. Have a delicious breakfast, do some yoga, go for a walk. It'll be very nurturing for you. That's true anytime, but especially Sunday morning under these influences. By 11 o'clock in the morning, the Capricorn moon will trine Uranus. And then we're going to let go of any hesitation. We'll let go of any kind of restriction or self-doubt, because Uranus just embraces anything that's new ideas, new ways of doing things. And that's going to be the ruling influence for the next few hours. So between 10 a.m. maybe in the morning Eastern time and around 1 in the afternoon. And then in the early evening around 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, the Capricorn moon forms a harmonious sextile to Venus in Pisces. This is just a lovely time, but it's so faint you may not even notice. But it's a beautiful time for relationships and creativity, for love, for spending time with your children or your grandchildren or your pets. It's just a beautiful time when the heart can open for a few hours. And that takes us to Monday, March 8th. The Capricorn moon is going to harmonize in a sextile to the Sun and to Neptune, which are both in Pisces. And again, that's just a day of sweet feelings, open heart, creativity, imagination. It's a beautiful way to start a Monday. And we'll have another video then. So thanks so much for being with me today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me below, and I will see you next week.